Okay. Oh, are we on now? Okay. Good morning, everybody. Glad to see everybody made it in this morning. I decided I better do something to calm the crowd down a little bit so Jonathan could get started here. Welcome. For those of y'all who have not had a chance to meet Jonathan Page and his wife Sally, they're here today, and Jonathan's going to teach class and preach this morning and again this evening. But we're going to let him get started in class, and good luck.
Words of inspiration. Good luck. Let me tell you just a little bit about myself. Was born and raised in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I am not an American citizen. I am Canadian, but I am legit. I have a green card. It's actually functional. It's not out of date anymore. Just got my new one. I will be working towards my citizenship, hopefully this year, but that's been a long time, work in progress. I am the youngest of four boys. My two oldest brothers do still live in Canada with my parents. We were raised in the church in the late 1980s. My parents started a congregation in the basement with about 4 or 5 other families. And West Hamilton Church of Christ grew from there, and I watched my father and several other people come together and create a congregation. We never owned a building. We stayed at Mohawk College, which was like a junior college there in Hamilton, and we just utilized their facilities, and we were one of the fastest growing congregations in Ontario. It was incredible to watch. And that's what inspired me to always work within the Lord's church. I was not going to be a preacher. I went to Harding to be a nurse. That did not work out, so I went into teaching. All my brothers are teachers. That's what we do. My brother Dan works at a private school out in California. I know. How do you have Christian schools in California? But he is out there. My 2 oldest brothers work and have worked in the school system for a long time. 2 of my brothers are preachers. Dan, I just mentioned, is being asked to be an elder. We work in the church. There was a time when I had to leave Harding for just a short period of time, and my father-in-law at the time came to me and said, "You love to teach." I said, "I do. More than anything, it's a passion." He said, "Why don't you teach about God?" And that started me on my path on ministry. My first job was in Florida, Mayo, Florida, a little congregation of 25. Stayed there about a year and a half, and it was a great opportunity. Learned a lot about ministry, and I realized I wasn't ready for full-time ministry. I needed some help, I needed some guidance, and I needed some training, and I didn't like the Florida weather. This little Canadian melted when I walked outside every time, so I left as fast as I could. And my wife was from Texas, and she goes, "Let's go to Texas." And I said, "Yes, nothing west. I need trees." Do you know you don't have trees here? None at all. And that's actually something that Sally and I have been talking about. But we came to Texas and came to Bowie. And when I came to Bowie, I was a youth and family minister. I said, 2 to 4 years, I want you to train me. I want to get back in the pulpit. Will you do it? And the reason I took the job in Bowie was because of the minister. He was incredible. And I said, I need to learn under you. For 10 years, he and I worked together. I was the youth and family minister in Bowie for 13 years. And he left, and we brought in another young guy. It didn't work out as well. He left, and then the elders there said, "We want you to step into that role." And I tried it for a couple of months, and I said, "Let's just do a couple months trial. And if you say you're not the one, or I say I don't want to do it, it's everything is fine. We go back to original roles." And they said, "Great." And that was September, and by November they said, everyone is saying you need to step into that role. And I've been preaching in Bowie for about 7 or 8 years now. And so that's my journey of how I got here. I have 2 children, fantastic kids, 22 and 20. Journey is a cowboy. That is not what I pictured for my son. He was supposed to be an engineer. He was supposed to do something with his life, and now he's a cowboy. But it was one of those things that I didn't see that as a passion, but it was his passion. And so he's actually moving to Texas. He is moving to Stanford, thank you. I'd like to introduce my wife. She's finance, scheduling, and memory for me. So he's moving to Texas, and he's continuing on and working on a ranch there. My daughter is 20. She is the music teacher at the intermediate school in Bowie, and I have no idea where she's going to be next year. She is trying to explore what she wants to become, but that is our family. Any questions? Really? All right. If you have your Bibles, I want to look at Mark chapter 4 today with you. Mark chapter 1. So I need you to know something about me. I am in Bible class. I'm going to ask questions. Please answer those questions. I love interaction. I think this is the greatest opportunity we have to study God's Word. And when we get to sit down, we open up His Word. We'll guide those thoughts, but I want your thoughts. I want your input. I want you to tell me. And what I've learned through the years is that as a collective body, we have a lot of information. And we can share that information of what things that we have learned, that we have studied. And so I want to open that up. And if you have a question, please feel free and ask. David's here to answer all of those questions. And so I appreciate him so much being here today. So Mark chapter 1. I want to look at verse 40 through 45. And I want us to look at Christ today, this morning, and in the evening at 6 o'clock. I want to look at two different stories, how Jesus comes onto the scene and how he connects with people. And I want us to see the reaction to that. So that's what I want to do with you today. So I'm going to start in verse 40. It's a very small, just 5 verses long, but the impact that it has and what it teaches us is extremely important and just kind of overwhelming. A leper came to him, imploring him, and kneeling and said to him, "If you will, you can make me clean." Moved with pity, he stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, "I will be clean." And immediately the leprosy left him and he was made clean. And Jesus sternly charged him and sent him away at once and said to him, "See that you say nothing to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest and offer your cleansing what Moses commanded for proof to them." But when he went out and began to talk freely about it and spread the news so that Jesus could no longer be openly enter a town, but was out in desolate places, and the people were coming to him from every quarter. Wow. Just really an overwhelming passage, if you ask me, but how Jesus connects with this person. Tell me something about leprosy. What do you know about leprosy?
It was kind of a group of a bunch of general skin conditions
Yeah.
that we divide out now. Generally, it was just a debilitating skin disease.
Absolutely right. So they really put every skin disease into this whole group of leprosy. It could be very mild, like a rash, to almost a deformity. If you ever see pictures of leprosy, people can actually almost become deformed. You won't even recognize them. It can go to such an extent. What else do you know about leprosy during the time of Jesus? They were rejected. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Anything else? So if you were walking along the road and other people were coming along, do you know what you had to do? What's that? You had to get off the road, but what did the person with leprosy have to do? Correct. You are correct. I have no idea what you just said. But they had to declare that they are a leper. They had to put their hands up and say, "I'm a leper," so that person would not get close to them because leprosy was contagious. And the people had a fear of that. So if you actually were diagnosed with leprosy and you were put out of not just the town, but your family, do you realize that? Your family. Not only that, you were not allowed to go to the synagogue. You were not allowed to go to the temple. Your worship was absolutely cut off. And you have to remember, if you think about the Jews at this time, what was the center of worship? Synagogue. Yeah, they're going to the synagogues often to read scripture. We find Jesus there, but where else? Where's the main one? Temple. You're not allowed to go. Could you imagine being cut off from worship? Cut off from your spiritual family? That would be hard, wouldn't it? My family is huggers. We love to hug. The best hugger in my family is my father. He has this, he's a great big man. And the thing I miss the most is his hugs. He has these huge bear hugs. And when you get those hugs, you just know everything's going to be okay. Do you know the hug I'm talking about? Could you imagine not having that anymore with your family? Well, let me ask you this question. Who are the lepers in your life right now? Okay. Yeah, okay. What I'm asking here is that are there people in our life that you look around and we treat them almost like a leper? Who could that be? I get paid by the hour, so whatever you want to do. There you go. Thank you. The homeless. That's a hard place to be. We had the opportunity to go down in Fort Worth and take water bottles to the homeless, and one of the things we try to get our youth group to do is to talk to them, to break down those barriers. That was very difficult. That was scary for them. What do? They all got all tensed up. Anybody else that we might treat? So that? Inmates, yeah. Or somebody who's gotten out of prison. I know several of those individuals. Lifestyle choices, absolutely. Good. Especially in this day and age that we're dealing with it, right? People with addictions. We kind of label them as well pretty quick, and they become almost like lepers. And we look at them and we kind of stand away. But I want you to see what Jesus is going to do. I just want you to see that even though we're looking at this passage and we're looking back in the time of Christ, this really comes to us and it really talks to us today. So this is not just a lesson to learn, but it's a lesson that we can learn from us. And so he comes to Christ, and what does he ask? If you will. Is anybody, if you are willing, do you have that in your translation? If you are willing. You know, he never asked Christ, can you do it? Because he knows he can. He comes to him and he says, will you? Will you cross a boundary? Will you cross a boundary that nobody else is going to cross? Are you going to cross the boundary that my family won't even cross? Are you going to cross the boundary that even the priests won't even cross, the religious leaders? Will you come close to me, and will you come to me, and will you heal me? And the answer from Christ is what? Absolutely yes. It says, I'm reading from the ESV if you wanted to know, but he says he moved with pity. Does anybody have a different word there? It's a good word. Does anybody else have a different word in their translation on that one? Compassion. How many times in the gospel do you think it talks about Jesus' compassion? A bunch. Over 10 times throughout the gospel, he's going to be moved with compassion. So when he's looking at the crowd and he's going to feed the 5,000, why did he want to feed them? He was moved with compassion. He looked at the crowd and said, they need this. There are all of these moments you're going to find throughout the Gospels that Jesus looks at someone and says, I need to show them compassion. If you're going to show compassion, then you need to be compassionate. I know that sounds kind of, it should go and it doesn't sound right, but there's a lot of people who think they try to show compassion, but they're not a compassionate people. That's a choice. It's a heart condition. Does that make sense? And when you look at Christ, he's a man that has compassion. So he looks at this man and says, absolutely yes. Anybody watch The Chosen? Had a couple people. Do you remember the scene on that? When they're walking along the road and they actually depict this? And in the show, it's Peter that stops Jesus and says, what are you doing? He's a leper. You can't get close to him. And I can see Peter doing that. It was Peter, right? Yeah. And Jesus says, no, let him come. And he is willing to cross that boundary and talk to him. And the thing that you find here is in verse 41, and I have it underlined. I underline a lot in my Bible, but I underlined it twice. With his hand, what did he do? He touched him. A lot of times we come into contact with the people we were just discussing, and we almost believe that we can become unclean when we're around them. But Jesus comes onto the scene, and he says, no, I can take an unclean person and I can make them clean. And a lot of times when we look at the unclean, the lepers of our life, if I'm around them, if I'm close to them, I might become unclean as well. And it's almost like we keep them at a distance. But what Jesus teaches us is that, well, let's bring them closer so that we can make them clean and change their life. And of course, he says, I am willing. So I'm going to do something that you probably didn't see coming. We're going to go to Leviticus. Are you excited about that? I want to go all the way back to Leviticus, please. And Leviticus chapter 14. I know when you're doing your daily Bible reading, or if you're doing it through the year, you come to Leviticus and you just say, praise God. It's hard. It's a tough book. He repeats himself all of the time. It gets a little upsetting, honestly. I get so frustrated when I read it. But I want you to understand. Jesus says, I want you to leave, and we're going to talk about what he does at the very end here, what the guy does, the leper does. But he wants you to go, and I want you to go back and do what Moses said you needed to do. Does anybody know the process of what he actually had to do? Yeah, he's going to show himself to the priest. And that's exactly what I want to read about. In Leviticus chapter 14. I really don't want to read the whole passage here. But in the very beginning of this, it's God talking to Moses, and it says, this is how you're going to handle the leper when he wants to come and he wants to show himself to the priest. He's going to go out of the camp, and the priest is going to look at him. So he actually does not come into the camp. The priest is going to go out to him, and he's going to first look at him and look at his whole entire body where the leprosy was. And if the leper's disease, I'm in verse 3, is healed in the leprous person, the priest shall command him to take for him and take the cleanse of 2 live clean birds, and cedar wood, and scarlet, and hyssop, and the priest shall command him to kill one of the birds in an earthen vessel over fresh water. And he shall take the live bird and the cedar wood and the scarlet and the hyssop and dip them and the live bird in the blood of the bird that was killed over the fresh water. And he shall sprinkle it 7 times on the one to be cleansed of the leprosy disease, and he shall pronounce him clean. I want you to see some of the things, because if we understand what's going on in Leviticus, Mark chapter 1 really opens up for us. So what happens here in the very beginning, the person with leprosy says, hey, I think I'm clean. The priest goes out to him and he says, hey, I believe you are as well. There's a little bit more to it. You can see in Leviticus, I think in the next chapter, when they really talk about making sure that the leprosy was gone. But they took these 2 live birds and they killed the one, and later on, they're going to release another. What does that remind you of? Yes. Later on, it's the atonement sacrifice, right? We're going to kill one lamb, we're going to let one go. Wow. This is really starting to open up already. Over an earthen vessel, and then we're going to take fresh water. Do you know what that means? So it's not stagnant water. It wasn't from a little pond or this source, but it's over fresh water, maybe from a spring or a river or something that's moving. It's the water was moving. And so they took a little bit of this fresh water, they put it inside the earthen vessel, they killed the bird, the blood went into the water. Is this triggering anything yet? Blood and water? Okay, we're going to keep going here. It's really going to come all together. Then we're going to take these 3 pieces together. We're going to take the cedar wood, we're going to take the scarlet wool, and the hyssop. The cedar wood, it helps against decay if you ever work with it. I know there's some woodworkers in here. Cedar wood is one of those woods that's not going to, it can stand up against the weather. It's not going to decay. It's not going to petrify. It also talks about the restoring of strength and soundness. It's always used in purification. All the way through the Old Testament, what you're going to find in purification is the cedar is going to be present. Then not only that, the scarlet wool, and this is just really talking about the color coming back into the person. When you were sick, you might become very pale. And this is really just talking about that color, that renewing again. And it's also associated with health and vital energy. We're taking a piece of cedar wood, we're taking the scarlet wool, and then hyssop. Hyssop was used for a lot of different things. For this, it was probably being used to get rid of some of the scents. It's a very, very fragrant. And somebody who has been out in the wilderness by himself and having this disease probably didn't smell so great, so that was part of it. Not the main part, but part of it. But it's the virtues of medicine. When you want to talk about ulcers, diseases of the skin, hyssop was constantly used. And again, it's part of the purification process. Do you remember what David writes in Psalms 51, verse 2? Cleanse me with thoroughly. And it's talking about a completeness there. And what you're going to do, you're going to take that piece of cedar wood, you're going to put your hyssop on it, you're going to tie it off with a scarlet yarn, all looking of saying, we're going to restore you to where you were before. They dip it in the water, and they put it onto the gentleman or the woman, and for 7 times. And it's talking about just a completeness. You're going to see the number 7 all the way through the book. I don't have time to really talk about that. So you have this process. But there's something else that happens. He's going to ask the guy to go home. He stays at home, but he can't go inside. He has to stay outside of the house, but he's allowed to go to the house, but he can't go inside of his house for 7 days. Then he comes back to the priest on the 8th day, and they meet one another at the tent of meeting. The priest is inside the tent of meeting, and the other gentleman is outside. And now we're going to look at, the priest is going to look him over once again. But I want you to see what the priest does this time. So we're in chapter 14. We'll start in verse 11. And the priest who cleanses him will set him to be cleansed these things before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And the priest shall take one of the male lambs and offer it as a guilt offering along with a log of oil and wave them for a wave offering before the Lord. A lot of times people believe that if you got an illness back then, it was because you did something wrong. Do you remember when they brought a blind man to Jesus? What was the question? Who sinned, him or his parents? So when they look at these moments, they're going to look at him and go, did he sin? What happened here? And so again, we have that sin offering. But also, you have to remember, he's been outside the camp. He has not been able to worship, has not been able to do any of these things, even going into the synagogue and such. And so we're going to bring him back, not just physically, but we're going to bring him back in the spiritual sense as well, okay? And he shall kill the lamb and place it, place where they killed the sin offering and the burnt offering in the place of the sanctuary for the guilt offering. Like a sin offering, belongs to the priest in most holy. The priest shall take some of the blood of the guilt offering, and the priest shall put it on the lobe of his right ear of he who's going to be cleansed, and the thumb of his right hand, and on the big toe of his right foot. That's weird, isn't it? But what it symbolizes is that he's covered from head to toe. He's covered with the blood of the Lamb. What he's going to do next is take some of that oil, that log of oil, and he's going to put it in his hand. He's going to take some of the oil and he's going to sprinkle it on the gentleman, but he's also going to put it on his earlobe, his right thumb, and his right toe as well. So when you understand this process and you really try to see what Jesus is trying to do, it's not just reaching out to somebody who's unclean and how you can make them well again and some of the effects of it. We're also seeing the process of how to become clean. And what is the process? Well, it's a foreshadow of what's going to happen through Jesus Christ. When you look through all the different sacrifices of the Old Testament, what was it foreshadowing? Jesus Christ. Every single one of them points to Jesus Christ. Did you know that this was the exact same thing a priest had to do in chapter 8 to become a priest? The exact same process. When Moses is going to sanctify Aaron and the other priests, the Levites, they did exactly the same thing. So the priest is bringing back this leper who was on the outside of the camp back into the fold with the same process. He became a priest. Had to be covered. And so you find this incredible moment. Let's go back to Mark chapter 1 now, okay? I want you to make some connections now. Now what do you see in Mark chapter 1? This gentleman is not just going to understand that this person is going to have compassion, that he is willing to cross lines to meet the people in their very needs and their lowest points in their life. They were there. He's going to be there. But can you imagine going through this process and then later on realizing how it all comes into fruition on this? that the blood of Christ fully cleanses us. The oil represents the Spirit, and are we not sealed with the Spirit is what the New Testament talks about. When we become a Christian, we were sealed with the Spirit, and now He is a part of us. What else do you see? What else do you see? A second chance, right? When the first bird was killed, something has to die. But then the one that is let go represents a new life. When Christ comes onto the scene and changes us, not just from the outside, not just our appearance, but from our core, from the inside out, there's a freedom that's going to take place. And that's what that little bird to me represented, that they released into the wild. That opportunity of a new life. You were dead at one time, but now you can have a new life. And that person was not just welcomed back into society, but their family. And not just to their family, but their spiritual family, back into that relationship with God. And that is what you're finding here. Anything else that you see? Comment? I'm that good of a teacher. That's fantastic. How much time do I have? You shouldn't have said that. You know, Jay already griped at me about how long I preach. So you better be careful. I might go for a while. So what happens in the story? He goes to the priest. He's gonna go, and why do you think Jesus says, "Don't tell anyone"? Okay.
Jesus did not want to be in that position where they're trying to make him king at this time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That could be one of the reasons. I don't think there's a wrong answer. Anybody else? Yes. Yeah. It didn't, yeah, absolutely. So it's going to shift from this whole process, and it's going to become a process through Christ. And he goes, I'm the high priest. And again, I think it's one of those moments later on, maybe in the leper's life. That's how I see it. I kind of picture what's going to happen in the future. He goes, wait, I remember the process. I remember this guy, and he must be the Messiah. And in him we were saved. Yeah, absolutely. Bypasses that whole process. Now it's going to be in Christ Jesus. Yes?
I find it interesting that Jesus sent the leper after he knew he was clean, still sent him back to the priest.
Yeah. Yeah. Why would he do that?
I was chewing on that. I was thinking maybe it was because for the leper to be able to reenter society. But
It's exactly right.
it says as a testimony to
Yeah. Yeah. I think you can get a lot of things there. One, we're still under the old law, even when Christ is on the earth. We're still under that old law, so we have to, if you want to come back into society, Jesus even knew, you're going to the priest, you know. And so I understood that, but man, that's going to be a great testimony of when somebody says, I knew you have leprosy. I remember what it was like. I knew you were out there. How did you become clean? Because we wrote you off. And he gets to say, Jesus Christ. No. Once a week, twice a week? No. Absolutely. Absolutely. How many priests changed after that moment of hearing that testimony? Maybe started looking and talking and listening to Christ and his teachings. Yeah. Now, do you see why I love Bible class? Love to hear your thoughts.
Did the leper ever have been seen as clean because he did not go to the priest?
Could the leper? If he did not go to the... I don't think so. I think he needed to go through that whole thing to be, honestly, to come back into society, because I don't think anybody else would really recognize that if you didn't go through the process. So, good question. But don't you love the ending to the story? I love how you all just look down. The ending. There's an ending? Don't you love the ending? He can't. How do you not talk about it? How do you not talk about the change in our life? How do we not, how do we stay quiet about Jesus Christ? When he took him and changed his life completely, and to be able to be back in his family, to feel those, those hugs, to worship again, to be around his family, to be around his friends, to partake of Sabbath. Do you understand he couldn't even partake of Sabbath with his family? But to be there and to partake of those moments, it's a life-changing. Long time ago, in Hamilton, there was we called it a halfway house. I don't know what it was really called. But it was men who were getting over addiction, and they were able to live in this home. And so they got out of the addiction program, and then they've helped them find jobs and establish themselves and to reestablish them in life. And this was a program that we were heavily involved with as a church. If you want to talk about life-changing, I wish I could show you pictures of a person who was under the influence of drugs and then years later healed. They don't even look the same. Do you know that? You could show the same, I wish I had a picture right now, but you could show the picture of both individuals and you would say, oh, the guy on the right was the person who helped the guy on the left. No, that's the same guy. Because when you come out of that, something like that, and you're actually healed, and they took care of the physical healing, we helped a lot with the emotional and spiritual healing of those guys. And to see the transformation, you know who the loudest witnesses were in the church? It wasn't John Page, who was raised in the church. Why did that church grow? They went out. When you are changed from the inside out and you understand salvation, reconciliation, wow. They couldn't stay quiet. I remember playing baseball or softball with these guys, and he looked at, one of the gentlemen was sitting beside me, I was really young, and he goes, why are you okay? Because I know I'm not okay. And I looked at him, I was like, I don't know. I have a good family, and I love God. And I remember him saying, okay, that must be it. And it was that moment where these guys changed their life. When you come and you look at this guy, his life has changed from the inside out, and he can't stop talking about it. How bad did it get for Jesus? Could he go into town? Nope. The wilderness is such a wonderful place to stay if you've never done it. I don't think they had the tents. I don't think they had an RV camper. But they were out in the wilderness, and they were out there, and then even the people, even though they couldn't come to the town, they went to him because they wanted to know who made this change. An impact on one individual can grow into a multitude of individuals looking to Christ. And I don't know if we understand that as much as we should, that if we change the life of one, what can that one person do? You can look into the New Testament, and when Jesus shows up on the road to Damascus with Paul, what was the change in how many people's lives that Paul touched, right? Because of one individual, Paul becomes the missionary to the Gentiles to preach the good news, to establish churches and establish elderships and incredible, incredible things. One individual. And so absolutely incredible to me of what was able to be accomplished in this. Questions or comments?
Didn't Jesus tell other people not to tell on different occasions?
Absolutely.
Reason? So he could continue his work and not be inundated?
I think it could be a multitude of reasons there. Could it be so that he could get into town and be around some of these people and connect with people? Sure, it could be something like that. I've always wondered and chewed on that. And I love listening to other people, maybe seeing their reasonings behind it. But when Jesus talked to those people and connected, they couldn't stop talking about it. And I think it came. And I think he knew what was going to happen when that happened. But I think it could be a lot of different reasons there. So how are you going to connect this week? I love talking about making it practical. Do you have somebody in your mind right now who you think you could connect with that might be on the outside looking in? We don't know the impact that you can make unless we try to make the impact. So I was in high school. I played football back in the day. I do not play anymore, obviously. I'm just out of shape. But I loved the game of football. I worked really, really hard in it. I became the captain of my football team, and that was a very big honor in our school. My brother was my youth minister. Tim came home from Harding, and he was working with the youth group, and he came up to me. He was coaching football in Ancaster. I was in Hamilton, next door neighbors, and we always scrimmaged them every year. Every single year we scrimmaged them. He goes, John, after the scrimmage, we're going to pray. You bring as many of your players to the prayer. What was my answer? Go ahead. What do you think my answer was? Are you that scared? I'm not going to bite your head off. My answer was no. I said, absolutely not. I said, you have no idea how much work and how much dedication I have put to be in this position for this team. I am one of their leaders. Absolutely no. Time got closer and closer, and my brother said, you got to bring them to the prayer. We're going to pray. Bring them to the prayer. And I said, no, no, no. Finally, I said, fine, I'll do it. Went to my best friend, Scott Morton. I said, this is what I'm going to do. And I grabbed Apoku. I still don't know what his first name is, but that is his last name. We always knew each other's last names. I grabbed Apoku, and I said, hey, I'm going to ask the whole team to come and pray when we go to do the scrimmage with my brother's team. Will you please come with me? And they said, we got your back. We'll go with you. Do you guys want to know what the end of the story is? Come on. What do you think the end of the story is? They did. Coach let me have an announcement. I prayed, and he said, hey, we're going to go over here and have a prayer. My brother's team was already over there. I said, if you want to come, come on. So I just turned right around. And I started walking. I knew Morton and Mapoku was with me, but it was Morton that said, hey, turn around, Paige. And I turned around, the whole team was there. Story gets better. After every single football game, what did we do? We prayed. The story gets better, but I don't like it. We played the Barton Barons. To this day, I hate them. I despise them. If you are a Barton Baron, I won't talk to you. But at the end of the game, we're getting ready to pray, and a couple of their guys are praying in the middle of the field. Scott Morton goes, let's go ask them to pray. I was like, no. If they know God, God bless them. Let them go. And he goes, come on, Paige, we got to go do this. So we went over, and we said, do you want to come pray with our team? Well, this is where the story gets really bad. They got up, went into their locker room, and brought everybody out. And we all prayed. Ooh, that was a humbling experience that God taught me that day. So we went through that whole season. I graduate. I couldn't go to Harding at first. I had some complications. And so I stuck around. Coaches asked me, hey, if you're around, come help us play a little. Is it Tom? Oh, good. Okay. So I went. Guess what they did all the next year? They prayed after every game. It wasn't because of me. The other guys stepped up and started praying with the team. One decision can make an impact. One decision, you might be praying with your arch enemy, the ones that you hate, and if you could hurt them on the football field, you did.
That bell was your 2-minute warning button.
He told me 5 minutes.
I'm cutting it down.
I thought I did a good job, but okay, we'll cut it down.
Thought I'd bring the football, you know.
For those of you who are A&M fans, I'm sorry. That would not have been the choice play I would have chosen on the last 2-yard line. You can make a difference, and you can change people's lives. The question is, if you're going to reach out, are you willing to reach out and cross some lines? And that is the biggest hang-up that we have. We're very comfortable with the people that we know, that we're very equal with, that you might be friends with. I'm not talking about crossing those lines. I'm talking about the lines that you look at a person who's alone sitting somewhere and having coffee by themselves, go ahead and talk to them and ask them what's going on in their life. It's the people that are sitting alone in college classes or in high school classes, the people everybody picks on. You need to be the one to cross the line and say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to make an impact in somebody's life. And what is incredible is when you can change a person and introduce Jesus to them and they can change from the inside out, you don't know what's going to happen and what the explosion is going to be. But that is the greatest feeling in the world when you make a difference in somebody's life. So, any questions or comments? Wow, you're ready to stand up and go too. Good night. All right. I'm looking at one of your elders, which I forgot his name. God bless. Looking forward to getting to know you today and this evening. I hope to talk to you more this afternoon about 4:30. So, what do we do to dismiss usually? You are dismissed.